Welcome back to the CyberVault. Today I'm very excited to be joined by Alfonso. Alfonso's co-founder and CEO of Kriptos. They're a platform helping organizations identify, classify, and secure sensitive data at scale. Alfonso's work sits right at the intersection of data protection, risk, and AI. So, to be honest, it kind of makes him a perfect guest to break down where data security is heading next. So, today we're going to deep dive into how companies can better discover and secure their sensitive data, where secure AI adoption really looks like, and how platforms like Kryptos are helping reduce risk and meet compliance without slowing down innovation. Alfonso, thank you so much for joining me here today. Very excited to have you on. Why don't you maybe give us a little bit more of an introduction to yourself?
Sure. First, thank you so much for your invitation and for your time. I'm Alfonso, co-founder of Kriptos. I'm in charge of all the product, the technology, and the operations of the business. We started Kriptos in 2018 as a company that mainly focused on the data discovery and data classification space. Currently, we have operations in more than 10 different countries in America, from United States, Mexico, Peru, Ecuador, Chile, Argentina, Colombia, and 70% of our current customers are from the financial industry and use our software for protecting their data and avoid data leakage, comply with several and different regulations, and comply with other different use cases and things around our product and our technology.
Awesome. Well, like I say, very exciting to have you on. And I think what you guys are doing is also very, very relevant, let's be honest, especially for the current market. But we'll get into that a little bit later because I want to start with the basics. Let's kind of really go at the foundations of basically why is data discovery and classification still such a challenge for companies today?
Sure. So first, I think that we need to split the issue or the problem in two aspects. The first one is, and what we do is, we mainly focus on unstructured data. If you see all the statistics and all the information around the world, basically between 80 to 90% of all the information that produce a company in the world is unstructured data. So it could be documents, files, pictures, videos. So the biggest amount of information that every company produces is unstructured data, and that's what we mainly focus with our current product and technology. And then you have structured data that are information that has been produced by companies. It could be databases and I don't know any other type of information that belong to that category. Now, why this is important is because the issue with unstructured data is that it's produced by hundreds or thousands of users or employees at your company from different applications, different, endpoints, file servers. So controlling that amount of data, adding protection to those specific type of, files or some other kind of digital assets that belong to this um, category that I mentioned before, it's really complicated. If you are a company of 1,000 employees, maybe you will have 10, 20 million files that has been spread through different computers, file servers, SaaS applications. So the big question is which percentage of that information is sensitive, what kind of information you should protect, who has access to that kind of information, where is the location of that specific type of files or documents. So it's a huge problem that at scale is very difficult to solve, and that's why we decided to create Cryptos. How we can bring that kind of visibility to our customers so they can understand all these different aspects around unstructured data and help them to achieve full protection at full scalability.
Awesome. And I mean, let's dive into that a little bit more because you obviously built Kryptos to tackle that exact issue. I mean, why don't you break down like what are the core problems that you set to solve out when it came to kind of starting the foundations of Kryptos?
So the first thing is, and that's something that I personally believe, that organizations shouldn't have to choose between, data protection and business operation. So that's one of the key things that it's happening a lot in our industry. If you need to protect something, then you block that, and then you have a user that maybe needed to send outside of the company that kind of information or file or document. So understanding the business operations and building a product and the technology that can also help you to understand If the document is sensitive, but it needs to live outside of the organization, then you need to apply another type of control or protection to that specific file or document. So understanding that is something that push us as a company and as a technology to develop specific capabilities and features that allow us to, at full scale, understand and classify and discover all these different use cases so our customers can achieve full data protection without, generating a bad or a negative impact to their business operations. And that's one of the, I think, basic things and the most important one at the moment that a company tries to implement data protection tools or things like that.
No, for sure. And I kind of really like what you're talking about there, because ultimately I think sometimes what the biggest hesitancy is for adopting new technology, specifically within security, is the inconvenience element. It's often really clunky, it's often quite time consuming to use, and more often than not the most user friendly. So it can really be off putting. I think kind of another thing about data security, because it isn't just about protection, it's also about kind of knowing what to protect. Where do we prioritize here? I mean, how do you help companies actually see their risks before it turns into a breach?
So for that, and that's something that also we do a lot with cryptos, is to solve this problem, you need to tackle this with customization. And that's something that we do with our company. So, for example, every customer at Kriptos has a different algorithm or technology that is mainly focused and customized to understand their unique, business language, business context, to discover, classify, and label their own data. And why we do that is because if you are a company, again, with 1,000 users that belong to the financial industry and you have 15, 20 million files, for you, maybe some documents will be sensitive or not. But if you go to another company of 500 users that belong to the retail industry or manufacturing, then they will have, other business contexts. So for them, sensitive data will be maybe other type of use cases. So the first thing is, and for me, that is very important. We need to adapt the technology and fully customize or AI engines in this case to understand which files, which documents are really sensitive and which are not. And that's something that for me it's very important to tackle. That's the first thing. The second one is how you perform that customization. So what we do at Kriptos is we use a multi-layer AI data classification solution. So first we need to understand if based on the content and the context of each file, it contains some PII data. That's the normal, that's the standard. If you need to comply with GDPR or something like that, first we need to understand that what kind of PII data we find in the content of the file. Now, this is something, this is a specific statistic from Kriptos, but just to give you a number, we have classified over 1 billion documents. And from that, only 30% of their files contain PII data. So the other 70%, it doesn't. And that is also important because if it doesn't contain PII data, it doesn't mean it's not confidential information. So how we can understand which of those files and documents are sensitive based on, again, the business language, the business context, the industry that specific company belongs. So that's the second use case. If the document doesn't contain PII data, then how can I understand with my AI models if it's confidential or not? And that's for me is the customization part, how we can understand intellectual property for that business, business strategy, financial operations, like how we can understand all these different use cases so we can teach to our AI and it can at full scale, like discovering and labeling according to that specific customization process that we accomplish with every customer. So that's the second point. The third one is what percentage of that data is at risk? So how we can understand some specific behaviors around what a specific employee did with a specific document. Why this employee download this sensitive document a Thursday at 2 a.m. to his or her computer, for example. That's one use case. The other one is why a specific employee is having access to sensitive data that doesn't belong to that specific role. So, this person from the marketing department is having access to sensitive documents from human resources department. So why is happening that and how we can recognize that at full scale? And the last one is the part of the operation. And that was what I was mentioning from the beginning of the podcast, right? Um, if the document is sensitive, it doesn't mean that it does not need to live outside of the company, right? So how we can understand that? And for that, we use another type of classification. Even if it's confidential or not the file, what we need to understand if this is a document that needs to live outside of the company, I don't know, maybe in the next weeks, in the next months. So you cannot block that kind of file with DLP or CASB, for example. So if you can see what we are talking here is we use multi-AI, different type of layers and models and algorithms for every document that we analyze, so we can understand all that context and say, look, this is the kind of files that you need to block, that you need to protect, that you need to put alerts, that you need to it depends on the solution that you have implemented at your company, but this is what we suggest that you need to apply in terms of control and protection.
For sure. And obviously the way that you're breaking it down there makes it seem you have to have those multi different angles that you're taking. But I think it's that customizable aspect of recognizing every business, every size, they're always going to have different priorities and a different version of what sensitive data might look like. And obviously when we're looking at data, it's really easy to associate that with just kind of, files that are sat on kind of a desktop or in, kind of a shared file or whatever it may be. But obviously, if we look at AI adoption, this is exploding within businesses. And obviously, a lot of that is also allowing not just automation, but if you're looking at things like Gen AI, you're looking at a system or program or whatever you would like to call it that actually has access to data and can control data. I mean, how can companies ensure that they're not exposing sensitive data when they're experimenting with all these different new tools that are coming out?
Right. And you have different risks in that specific area. For example, and I will take this just a minute, but if you take into consideration structured data, for example, and what risk could see on that specific space related with AI adoption, maybe it is more related with the part of how you train AI models using some specific data and how you can ensure the security of that data before using to, I don't know, adapt or customize or build a specific AI model or something like that. That is something that we don't do currently, but the risk that we tackle with Kriptos is more the part of if you are a company and you want to adopt at full scale with every employee, I don't know, Microsoft Copilot, Gemini, ChatGPT, Claude, any other tool in the market that you consider that it's going to be like the AI tool for every employee at the company, then you have the technology and then you start integrating that product or that specific application with different data source. So for example, if you are in Google Workspace, of course you want to integrate that with your Google Drive and your shared drive because you want to understand the content of your files and your documents to, improve something specific with a specific task or process that you want to perform using that kind of AI tool. If you are in Office 365, you want to integrate that with SharePoint and OneDrive and do something similar. Now, that is why it's very important to classify your information because these AI models only respect boundaries or controls or securities if the data is labeled. So if I say in this specific file in SharePoint or in Google Drive is confidential, then this AI understand that and say, okay, I cannot deliver to you what you asked me to do because this is sensitive data. So you cannot have access to that file. So you can control, like that kind of exposure. And for that, it's very important that you label every single file at your company if you are, starting to integrate all these different tools with your employees. So that's one use case. The other one is what happens if the employee has an Excel, for example, in their computer that contains 10 or 20,000 different types of PII data and you want to upload that to this one of these specific AI tools because you want to perform a specific task, then that is illegal because you are uploading, a huge Excel with thousands of PII information, and you didn't have the consent for doing that with all these thousands of people that you have recorded all that specific data in the content of that specific document. So how you can control that, how you can understand and say, look, all the documents that contain this type of PII data or this amount of PII data, you never need to upload that kind of information in these tools because that is illegal and that's a risk for the company. So for that, you need to classify and label and say, look, these documents that contain PII data in these amounts, then you cannot use it with these AI tools. So
Mhm.
again, this is a problem at full scale because if you have 20 million documents and 1,000 employees or 5,000 or 10,000, it depends on the size of the company. Then how you do that at full scale, and for that you need to classify, label all these different documents with a high level of accuracy, and then implementing all these different controls with all of these technologies so you can ensure and reduce the risk of happening something of like as I was mentioning to you before.
Yeah, and it sounds like obviously the larger the company, and it's definitely more challenging for the adoption of these technologies. I mean, kind of if we really break it down without it being overly kind of complex, because obviously you, as you say, you really need to categorize all the different data that you're working with. I mean, if we were to be totally transparent and just look at the realities here, I mean, as it stands with the technologies and stuff in place, is secure AI adoption really possible at scale right now? I mean, what would it take to do it right to make sure that you can actually embed this while scaling?
Yeah, and I think that is, I mean, that is very similar to other kind of risks that also you are exposed as a company. And what I mean with that is that you can never ensure 100% of, reducing a specific risk around your company. So what you need to define is like what is the percentage of risk that you can reduce implementing all these different tools, and still you will have, a small percentage of risk that thing like a risk like that could happen. But the thing is how you can implement an architecture that allow you to say, okay, at least I'm reducing 70 or 80% of this kind of risk happening at my company. I
Yeah,
will have a 20 or 30%, but it's better than, having nothing. So I think that that's more the conversation. It's
yeah.
impossible to do that for the 100% of the use cases, but at least how you can, build something that can help you to reduce 70, 80, 85% of the risk. And that will be a lot.
Yeah, I think that's always the thing with security, isn't it? The downside being it can never be 100%, especially because innovation often is much further ahead than where we are a lot of the time when it comes to security, and it's that cat and mouse chase. I mean, let's kind of flip back here because obviously you've already touched base on a few different things that you're doing over at Kriptos to really help solve these problems. But I mean, kind of talk to us a little bit about like the behind the scenes. I mean, what makes Kriptos different from other solutions in the space? Because it sounds like you've got quite a few different offerings here. So be really interesting to kind of see exactly what that looks like.
Sure. So I think the main part of it, it's more related with what I say. It's the difference between um, custom AI versus generic AI. So
Yeah.
yeah, for example, you can go with other vendors and understand how they are discovering and classifying data, and maybe 60% of the use cases they are going to perform well because with generic AI it's gonna be enough. Or you have other vendors that have some models where you can customize the AI, but it could take you months, maybe 1 year, 2 years to adapt and build all the different capabilities to ensure a high level of accuracy. So what we do a difference is that we do all of that in less than 1 month. So we involve a specific technical team from our side that basically are people that belong to the data field, like for example, data scientists, data engineers, data analysts. And these people basically during that month work with every customer to ensure a building of a specific algorithm to understand their unique, business language, business context, and things like that. But also to ensure a high level of accuracy to detect, discover, classify, and label those type of documents. So that's the difference. We have a specific process with a specific team that per every customer in the onboarding of our solution, we basically do that per every customer to ensure that. And the difference is that you are going to have at full scale better accuracy to classify and label documents in compared with other solutions. Now,
Mm.
why other solutions in the market don't do the same? Because it's not scalable for them. So if you have 1,000, customers in the world, you cannot do that kind of onboarding process per each of these customers. That's why right now at Cryptos at this stage, the majority of our customers belong to the enterprise segment, big companies over 1,000, 5,000, 8,000, 10,000 users, because they perceive that kind of value and they invest and they pay for that kind of customization.
Mm.
That's something that an SMB category cannot afford because they don't have the budget and the resources to purchase something like that. So that's why we are in that stage where until now our major accounts belong to the enterprise segment.
Yeah.
And it's because of this specific process that, make us unique in this category.
Yeah, really good to get that breakdown. And I think you're kind of reiterating what you just said there in kind of what was important at the beginning. It's that customization aspect that really is going to add the value when it comes to data security, especially at scale. So, I mean, for kind of any of the security leaders listening in today, what kind of could we say that, look, if there's one thing that you're going to do to rethink your approach to data, or something that you should really action coming off this podcast, what would that be?
I think it's the part of the importance to design and implement an architecture that allow you to protect data without, disrupting business operations. And for me, that's the key thing because with some customers, they are like, I purchase this DLP or CASB solution. I start blocking everything, and it's a complete mess. It's a lot of stress in the company, and that's not the idea. So for me, it's how you find that balance and how you build your own stack to build this architecture. So you can say, okay, I'm protecting the most important stuff at the company, but also I'm not, disrupting business operations or workflows that are very important for the company. And for me, that's the key thing: how you can perform that, how you can design your strategy around that principle, and how you can demonstrate that. For me, that's like the key thing, and what we try to help to our current customers to achieve.
Awesome. Well, Alfonso, it's honestly been so valuable having you here today. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, this is I think it's a very hot topic. It's a very relevant part of the space because I think really, data is at the heart of security a lot of the time. It's what we're trying to protect. It's what we're trying to secure. And I think kind of some of the ways that you've broken it down here makes it really digestible and also understandable as to how critical this is, especially as we see the landscape evolving with things like AI adoption. So thank you again for coming on the
Thank you so
podcast
much to you.
today. And obviously to our listeners, as always, don't forget to subscribe. Make sure to share this episode with any of your security peers. Make sure to reach out to Alfonso and the team if you would like to hear a bit more about Kriptos and what they're doing over there. But it's that's it for today. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll
Thank you
see
so
you
much.
next time. Thanks so
See you.
much.